Hi all. I'm sitting here all ready with my computer to do a live video on Facebook, and wouldn't you know, Mercury retrograde decides it's going to have a bit of a play at my expense, and my computer's not working. So, apologies for being half a minute late, but anyway. So, thank you to anyone who's there, and I just wanted to touch on tonight some things that came up when I was doing some online support sessions with clients recently. And there's a lot of people in the world at the moment doing work on the inner child. It's really beneficial work. It is really, it's needed work. And I won't get into why, because over the last 15 years, I've certainly been a huge supporter of inner child work for healing. And since I started this group, I have let you all know why. So just for tonight, what I wanted to talk about was that in this work that we do in healing the inner child, the thing that most people have heard about is the wounded child. The wounded child being the child that feels all of the things, like our emotional self. And I'm drawing tonight from study and teaching that I've done myself over the last 15 years that has drawn on the expertise of a guy from the Western culture whose name was Eric Berne. And he was a psychoanalyst in the 1950s in the US. And the work that he did in trying to recognise the different energy states that each of us behave and operate from in any given situation is countless. That's what he discovered. He says that we have hundreds, if not thousands, of different ego states that we operate from. And he says that ego states are energy. So there's this thing that I've seen amongst a lot of people over the past 15 years where the ego is like this big thing that's made out to be something sinister, but it's almost like the ego's taken on its life of its own. Thanks, Joe. And so the reality is, though, according to Eric Berne, that it's just energy. Now, if we were to delve into physics, we would know we're just energy. So Eric Berne had something going there. But let's remember too that he was from Western culture, and so it seemed like this really amazing thing that he'd come up with. But people before him had already touched on that anyway. And so in the Eastern cultures, and actually in religious cultures, they already knew about the ego and that it was just energy. And then we come along in our generation and we go, oh my goodness, have you heard of this thing called ego? It's so bad and so sinister. And how could anyone think that it was only just energy? But thankfully, now in the 21st century, thanks to Eric Berne's work and the work of hundreds of thousands of others over time, we know ego is energy. So what I want to talk to you about tonight is that energy, that Eric Berne, what he says is we have a parent, an adult and a child energy. But there's hundreds, if not thousands, of split-offs of those three things. And so in doing all kinds of different studies and meeting all kinds of different people, as well as drawing on my own intuition, I've used his work to underpin my own healing. And I've found parallels to every other thing that I've read and that I've seen. You look at there's a lot of people in educational settings and health settings, mental health settings, that say that there's 4 personality types. And I actually linked that back to the 4 elements. And then, just a minute, I've got to put my glasses on to read the message, sorry. Oh yes, that's okay. My computer's frozen too. So those 4 personality types that they talk about, I actually, when I look at them, I pair them up with Berne's parent, adult and child. And it always makes sense to me. And I've had a lot of people who've said to me in the years that I've been teaching it, around my own theory of this, that Eric Berne's transactional analysis is a load of rubbish. And I understand why people say that, but for me, they say it because they don't understand it. And what happens, it's a great lead-in to what I'm going to talk about, is because when we don't understand things, there's a different child part of us that comes into play. The wounded child comes in and goes, I feel afraid because I don't understand. So once that feeling arises, then we go into a behaviour. And that child part of us goes into a behaviour to cover up that fear so that no one will know that we feel afraid, because that feels powerless. Then what happens is we go into this behaviour, and that is the adapted or the adaptive child. Now, some people call it the rebel child, and it is a form of rebellion, but it's actually a rebellion against fear. So one of the things, I really love this particular child part of us, this adapted child, because when we're really young, we come into this world and we're what Berne would call the wonder child. And I call that my essential divine self. It's this amazing, innocent, spontaneous, loving, amazing child, which most of us would know our own children or grandchildren to be when they're wonderful, maybe when they're asleep. But the thing is that all kinds of different things happen in our lives. And I really want to stress, they don't have to be something that someone would recognise as traumatic. The thing is, we're energy. And when our energy moves, the child that we are doesn't understand that movement. And so it starts having thoughts about, oh, what could that movement possibly be? And because it doesn't know or understand, it then goes into feelings of fear, anxiety, terror, whatever, because it's like, I feel powerless because I don't understand. And the mind needs to understand, but because it's a child's mind, it can't. It doesn't have a language for it. It doesn't have an adult understanding of it. It just has a child understanding, and it doesn't know. So it goes into feelings of fear. That's when this adaptive child comes in, this part of self that says, you know what, I need to act now, convert this energy movement into something so that I can stop all this fear, because it's not safe to feel that much emotion at once. So I'm not sure if you're following me, somebody say so. But anyway, it's actually quite simple when you get down to it. The thing I really love about this adaptive child is that all of the behaviours that we go into, or that other people go into, when we are trying not to feel the fear, are all down to this adaptive child. So it's actually a really amazing, ingenious and inventive place within us to be. So some of the things that people over time have said they recognise their adaptive child is in them is things like addiction. That addictive, the behaviour that comes from addiction, or that leads to addiction, or that is addiction, comes from this adaptive child. So say for me, for example, I had an addiction to alcohol and other drugs as well, prescription and non-prescription, legal and non-legal. And when I had those addictions, that was the adaptive child trying to balance my energy out again, the only way it knew how. I didn't have... just a moment. What have we got here? Hi, guys. Okay, so the adaptive child says, okay, you're not able to cope with this energy moving, so I'll kick in now. I'll take over. I'll be your hero. Now, that's really great when we're a little child and we don't know any better, because it helps us to survive the movement of the energy that is us. But what happens is, over time, we start to learn new things, we start to practice new things, whether they be healthy or not, we're making changes. But the adaptive child will quite often not change with us. And it will hold on to the old behaviours that we had when we were little, because it sort of says, well, these are the things that worked, and I know that they work because its power comes in knowing. And so it starts to disempower us because it just goes on like a robot. It just goes on repeat. So the things that we used to do when we were, 5 or 8 or 12 or even 20, those things that we used to do without even thinking that covered up our feelings of fear, now we're trying to let go of the fear and release the energy around that. But as soon as that energy starts to move, the wounded child goes into fear and the adaptive child goes, don't worry about it, I'll take care of everything. And it rescues us, which is disempowering. So rescuing is like, we have a rescuing parent, according to Eric Berne, a rescuing parent part of ourselves, which sort of says, oh, don't worry about anything, there's nothing wrong with you, even when there is, and just takes over everything, which sort of negates our reality. But that behaviour starts with the adaptive child as it gets older and won't let go of their behaviours. And so we come into things like we zone out, anything we do to excess, like video games. There can be fun had with video games, and people that play them together can connect at a really great level. But if it comes to the point where you're doing it to avoid life or to avoid connecting with someone in real life and just zone out of your life because you hate it, that's where the adaptive child's come in and it's playing a video game for you. I used to be a big one for watching TV. There's nothing wrong with watching TV. In fact, I've got lots of healing out of it once I learned how to get it out of TV. But there were times where my adaptive child self came to watch TV and then took over and just went, just zone out of your life for weeks at a time. I used reading. My adaptive child used reading at times. There was a time in my life where I was becoming suicidal and I was terrified because I didn't know why I was and I didn't know what to do and I didn't think that I could ask for help. So my wounded child went into all this fear and terror. I like being zoned out sometimes too, Joe. And in that terror, the adaptive child then jumped in and went, it's okay, I'll save you. I'll create this behaviour. So I was like, oh, great, let's read these science fiction fantasy books. And I would zone out for 3 weeks at a time. So I'd sort of go into robot. I'd make meals for my kids. I'd give them hugs. But everything else was pretty much a blur. Oh, I've got 3 weeks off work. I just read the whole time I'm off work and not be a part of my own life. So there's a time when that can be helpful. Sometimes we need solitude, but we don't need isolation. So the adaptive child is the one that's come in because I'm in fear. That wounded child doesn't know what to do, because when you're in fear, the thinking part, the rational part of the brain's switched off. You can't get to it. And so, and so the adaptive child comes in, it takes over and it saves us. But then after it first saves us, if we don't learn to come back to the truth of who we are wholly without that disjointed, disoriented self, Eric Berne says, when we don't have the totality of our energy as one, and we're fully integrated and know exactly who we are, then that's where things like dissociation comes in. We all dissociate to some extent. Mine was more than some people, but not as much as others. But that dissociation is the energy of who I am is scattered everywhere. So those energy states aren't working together, and there might be real disjointedness whereby, some of the parts of my energy won't know that I'm this or who I am or what I am, or it's like, I have met people who are like, oh, well, there's a part of me that's a dog. And for me, myself, I have worked with energy in me as a part of me that is a dragon. And it's not a bad thing. It is that in that moment where the wounded child wasn't able to function, go, oh, but I'm too afraid because I don't know what's happening, why I'm moving as energy, then the adaptive child comes in and goes, you know what, just forget that you even exist, be a dragon for a while, because the dragon will be able to cope with what you're doing. And so, being a wounded child and not knowing what to do, I just listen to that rescuing, adaptive child. And it's a really ingenious way to get through what's happening when we're little. But as we get older, we really start to recognise that's not working for me now. I found the worst thing I can do is blame myself. The amazing thing is blame comes from that adaptive child. So the wonder child knows that there's no blame for anything, no judgment. It's, a bit like a baby angel. But if it was operating in this world on its own and had no nurturing parent or parent of any kind, it wouldn't survive, because it would be dangerous. You can't go around thinking that way. That's not what this world is built like. And so there is a part of us, a parent, which I'm not going to go too far into tonight. That'll be another session. And that parent part of us is there to nurture and help us grow and learn. Sometimes it happens. Yeah, part of you is a cat. Thank you. That's really big to admit that, and I really appreciate it, because there's lots and lots of people in this world who do recognise that some of the different parts of them, some of the different energy parts, don't identify as human parts. And while some people find that really strange, I've worked with it a lot and I know it's okay. I have had a moment where I just felt like I was a rock. And at first I thought, well, that's just daft. But then I sort of went, why is it? I'm nature. Well, nature is me. And so why wouldn't I have a part of me that's a rock? That because our mind is set up the way that it is, then our mind tries to identify with other things to identify us. And so there's a part of me that's a cat. That is because we love cats, we know cats, and sometimes our mind says, I can so relate to being a cat. And if I get into the energy of a cat, then this is what I would be like. And so I don't know if any of you have done role plays. I'm really good at role plays, because all I have to do is think, okay, what is the energy? Good for you, a star. I love that. And I've been a supernova. So getting into the role plays, all I have to do is say, okay, what's the energy? And I feel myself sit in that energy. So I don't sort of go, oh, there's that person over there. What do they feel like? But we can mirror other people's energy if we want to. And you may have done exercises in learning classes, so they'll say to you, just mirror another person, and you get into the same energy as them, not necessarily their energy. And so we can get into the energy of a star, yes, a mermaid. There is no end. Anything that we can imagine, we can get into the energy of. And it just comes from is we are energy, and so is every other thing. Good for you, Megan. I definitely have been a bitch, and I got no problem with the energy of that either anymore. And so, getting into the energy of who we are, I found that there was a part of me that really aligned with, I suppose it's like almost like in my mind, I wished that I could be like a certain person. In one case, my grandfather. And so my mind took it one step further and went, there's times where I am a 69-year-old man. And at first I thought, well, that's just creepy. How can I have a man inside me like that? Like, it grossed me out because I had issues. But then when I just sat with the energy of that, and I realised it was the same as my grandfather's energy, and I adore him. And then I thought, well, it's actually an honour to know that I share some of the energy of him. And then when I learned more from what Eric Byrne was talking about in transactional analysis, I recognised that that's how it's supposed to happen. Because he says when we're first born, we are this child energy, just child. And for the first couple of years, that's all we are and all we know. And everything around us that's outside of us, we experience that, and it starts to build our belief in ourselves. So all the people around us, or the media and the people taking care of us, and even any people hurting us, it's like we start to absorb their energy. We have no shield. And in that, we start to take on some of the characteristics of their energy. Hang on, Shirley, I'm just got to put my glasses on because it was a little bit longer. Yes. So, love animals, so identify more with a few different ones. An idea of mine is to reincarnate as someone's pet. Yep. And what I find with that is sometimes when I want to meditate, I will actually just lie down and imagine that I'm that animal. I can be someone's pet now. Because why not? Like, who says that I can't imagine that I'm a blade of grass? I find when I'm meditating, I want to do a guided visualization and say, imagine this, this, and this. Well, for me, that's quite easy. I just get into the energy of it. Oh, I can imagine I'm a tree. I can send strong roots down into the earth. Why can't I be that tree for a moment? I can, according to Eric Byrne. So all those things outside of me that start to put together in my psyche, in my mind, my beliefs about who I am when I'm tiny, that stays with me. And it is the adaptive child that comes in with the behaviours when I go into fear. That adaptive child brings in those different energies. And so if I have been around people who were addicted to alcohol and other drugs, like I was, then that is an energy that I'll bring in to try and rescue myself when I go into fear later on. Does that make sense? Things like working, your holisms, I call them, so workaholism and alcoholism and exerciseaholism. I don't even know if that's a word, but it is for me. There was a time where I was like that. And the whole thing was about trying to stop myself feeling fear. When we feel fear, our energy moves. The sympathetic nervous system gets activated. Whoosh, we have a hit of fear. The wounded child and the wonder child don't understand that fear. It's a wounded child going, I don't know what that is, which makes it more afraid. And so it then hands over to the adaptive child. It actually just takes over and goes, you know what, you can't deal with this, I will. And it takes over. And it's not until later on, until our thinking brain starts to form at around the age of 4 or 5, that we start to go, oh, hang on. We really hand over to the adaptive child. But the adaptive child's going to have to carry it until we're around 30 years of age and that thinking brain's fully formed. They used to say that it was around 24, 25. But now they've found it's actually around 30 and maybe older. We're all different. I know for me that it happens over and over. And I go back sometimes into that fear. The adaptive child takes over again. And then I learn again, oh, here's another way that I can come out. Meditation, becoming too hard, too much interruptions. Yep. So what I found for myself, Shirley, is to just check in with that child inside and find out the child wants us to meditate because meditation relaxes our nervous system. However, when we meditate, our wounded child comes up again. It gets afraid because our energy's been moving so much for so long that when we try and be still, then the wounded child goes into fear again. And then that adaptive child takes over and goes, it's okay, I'll save you. I'll behave this way so you can zone out and not sit still. And so that's something I'm working on myself at the moment. I've just noticed it recently, which is one of the reasons I decided to do tonight. And I'm going to have to wind up soon. But it was because I'm starting to exercise again. And I'm really aware of the behaviours that my adaptive child self goes into. And what I recognised a couple of days ago is now I'm riding an exercise bike. My fears tell me that I can't do it. It's going to hurt. Because it does. But it's like before I even get on the bike, the wounded child, no, don't, please don't, it's going to hurt. And so it starts to hurt before I even start pedaling. Now I'm used to that happening. So this time I've gone, you know what, this is just energy. The child doesn't understand why I'm wanting to move my energy. So it's going into fear. The adaptive child's coming in and going, well, just stop pedaling. That's easy, isn't it? And so it makes my mind wander, it makes me fidget, it makes me burp and fart and get hungry and get thirsty and all these other things that'll get me off that bike because I got to stop moving. So what I realised a couple of days ago is I'm meditating now while I ride the bike. So for most people it's like, oh, sit still and meditate. But I learned a long time ago, while there's times where that's really helpful for me, there's times where it's not. And so now, checking in with my inner child, and she said, oh, I just don't understand. I'm scared. And I said, no, okay. Knowing what I know, I'm now going to use a parasympathetic exercise to address a sympathetic nervous system problem. So when my energy starts to move, my parasympathetic nervous system gets engaged, and so my wounded child goes into fear because their energy's moving. So the way to address that is to do something that activates the parasympathetic nervous system without slamming that brake on. I'm meditating. It's only a brief one. It's very simple. It's Deepak Chopra, one that he's doing at the moment, which I think I mentioned the other day. And it is chanting a simple mantra very calmly and listening to really simple, I think it's bells, for 10 minutes. And there's 10 minutes of talking before it starts, which is really calm talking. And so for me, what I'm doing is I'm retraining my brain and my wounded child into recognising that pedaling on that bike is a relaxing thing to do. Does that make sense? Please tell me if things don't make sense, because I won't know and I'll waffle on like a tool otherwise. So anyway, it's really working for me, and I was doing 2, 5, 10 minutes each day because it hurt. And since I started meditating while I'm doing it, I'm now up to 18 and 19 minutes each day, and it's not hurting until the last minute. And so I'm really, really stoked about it. And it was, regardless of what other people have said to me, that transactional analysis is rubbish, it's transactional analysis that brought me to work it out. And that is helping me to keep going with it and understand my amazing inner child, myself. So I'm actually going to be doing a bit of a series on these things, the different things that Eric Byrne talked about. I'm not an expert on transactional analysis as he developed it, but in my own use for my own healing and supporting other people in theirs, I know quite a few things, and I'm just going to share them. I'm really open to questions. I'm really open to ideas. And if you think it's a load of bollocks, I'm open to hearing that too, because I can't learn and grow just by sitting here listening to myself. So I'm going to leave it there for tonight. If there's something you think that I could have covered, or that maybe you can come back and explore another time, let me know. Stay with the group. Keep commenting in the group. We really need to know, Joe and I, that it's even making a difference, because if it's not, then there's not much point in us having it. We'll have to shut it down. So if you find stuff, if you can contribute, please do anything at all that's helping you, because that helps others. And there's lots of times where we think that what we're going through couldn't possibly help others. That's our wounded child going into fear again. And the adaptive child's going, don't say anything about what you're going through, because it'll just make it worse. But all it's trying to do is stop you feeling fear. And I know from experience that when people open up and share what's happening for them, miracles occur. And suddenly the light goes on for people everywhere. So stay connected and open up and share. Love you guys, and we'll see you again another time. Bye. Thank you so much for coming.